I found out that it doesn't have to be expensive to fertilize your garden. In this video, I'm going to show you how to customize the fertilizer for your garden. That way you're not buying fertilizer that you don't need, and that's going to save you money.
All I have needs, I have not provided.
Welcome to my outdoor classroom. The first thing you need to do is have your soil tested. It's absolutely essential. I live in Central Florida, so I send my soil samples to the University of Florida. They only charge $10, and it costs somewhere around $8 in postage to send it. So for under $20, you'll get a real good readout of what's going on with your soil. You can purchase home test kits, but I prefer a professional lab to do it just because they give me advice on what to do with the results that I see. I'm going to put up on the screen the results of my soil test. And the first thing I want you to notice is the pH content. My pH is at 7.4, and you see that the target is 6.5. Now, normally up to 7.0 is just fine. When you get higher than that, then the different nutrients in the soil get locked up, and it's there, but because of the pH of the soil, the plants can't take it up into their root system and into the plant. Same thing is true if your soil is too acid. If it's 6.0 or below, some of those nutrients get locked up. Now, I'm not a scientist, so I can't explain to you why that is. Most of my crops will do just fine at 7.4, but I do aim to get it down to 7.0. And the way I do that is with sulfur. There's both sulfur pellets that's usually sold as a way to make your hydrangeas change color, and there's sulfur powder. I use both. When I'm preparing my soil, I use sulfur pellets. But when I see that the plants are getting deficient by what they're showing me through their growth and their leaves, then I will use the powder right onto the plants. It's one of those things that you can put directly onto the plant. I don't know so much about lime, which is what you would use to raise the pH of your soil. Years ago, a so-called professional told me to put lime on my soil. Well, I took his word for it, and I spread lime on my soil. I didn't have a very good garden that year. And then I did some research and found out that was probably the worst thing I could have done for my soil. And when I approached him about that a year or two later, he said, well, you know, most people around here need lime, but soil can change from 1 acre to the next. So I'm telling you that story to let you know what may be working for your neighbor down the road might not work for you. So have your soil tested. You don't have to send your soil in every year unless you want to. I wait every 3 or 4 years before I do. And honestly, it doesn't really change a whole lot. I just keep trying to supplement in ways that will, first of all, bring my pH down, and second of all, add the amendments that my research tells me that I can add. So what do those letters NPK mean? Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Do you remember that element chart in chemistry class? Here they are, NPK. So the best way I remember that is N is for nitrogen, P is for phosphorus, and K is for potassium. And if you have trouble remembering the order of the P and the K, phosphorus and potassium, just remember alphabetically. Phosphorus is going to come before potassium. That helps me. So here is a really crazy plant. It has root vegetables, it has leafy greens, and it has fruit. Now, all plants need all of the elements. A really healthy plant is going to definitely need the nitrogen. So let's look at nitrogen first. Nitrogen is to build a healthy plant, healthy leaves, healthy stems. Leafy greens such as mustard, spinach, lettuce, they need a lot of nitrogen. Now you have to be careful with nitrogen. You give those leafy greens too much nitrogen, plant's going to attract aphids. I don't know why. I just know it happens. So when I plant my leafy greens, I don't add nitrogen to the soil. And my soil already has enough nitrogen. So I don't want to overdo it. I don't have trouble with aphids. When I first started gardening, I did, because I just kept applying nitrogen-rich fertilizer. So that was one indication to me early on to not buy those bags that just say 666 or 1285 or whatever. I learned to customize what my soil needs. The next thing we're going to look at is phosphorus. Phosphorus gives you healthy fruit. Now I've got some funny fruit here. I have tomatoes that's red, but I colored my green beans red just for clarity. And this is squash and cucumbers down here. I told you it was a crazy plant. Those need a lot of phosphorus. Now, my chart that I got back, or the results from my chart that I got back, say I have high phosphorus count. So there again, I don't want a fertilizer that's got that middle number, a high count. Next is the potassium. Basically, potassium is for your root vegetables. I've got some crazy brown carrots here and some brown potatoes. I don't grow potatoes, I grow sweet potatoes. I do grow a lot of carrots. But you see here, my readout says I'm low in potassium. So when I get ready to plant carrots, I will add extra potassium to my soil. So where do I get those elements if I'm going to use them separately? So here's what I do. Since I don't buy bagged fertilizer, I buy it all separate. Nitrogen, anything that comes from the ocean. That's fish emulsion and kelp meal. When my corn indicates to me that it is getting low on nitrogen, I mix up fish emulsion and I pour it right into where I think the roots are. And by golly, within a day or two, the plant is getting green and healthy and growing fast again. For phosphorus, my go-to is bone meal. Bone meal supplies more than phosphorus, but that is what I use for things like tomatoes. For me, when my tomato plant shows me that it's distressed a little bit, I could add bone meal, but bone meal takes a while to break down to make that calcium available to the plant. So what I use is a liquid calcium called NutriCal, and it is more readily available to the tomato plant. Potassium. My go-to is wood ash, but you can also use eggshells and banana peels. Wow, that would take a lot of eggshells and a lot of banana peels, and well, there's only two of us. So since we have what I call a burn pile, where we burn our limbs and extra yard trash, that's where I get my wood ash. If you have a fireplace, save your wood ash. I live in Florida. I don't have a fireplace. So how do I know if my plants are distressed? Well, I have the neatest chart for you. I do not have permission to give you a link to this chart, but if you Google chart of deficiency or deficiency chart of micronutrients, there's going to be quite a few to choose from. You can go there and print your own. Just Google it and you'll see. Look for images and you'll find it. The common thing that I find in my garden is a deficiency of iron. If the leaves start turning yellow, but yet the veins are still green, then I know my plants are not taking up the iron that it needs. So I'm assuming that my soil is low in iron. So I will use a liquid iron, but I'll also use blood meal if the plant is showing me that it's not, there's not enough nitrogen in the soil. The crop that I grow that typically happens in is corn. Corn is a very, very hungry plant. It requires a lot of nitrogen. And that is where I see that kind of indication that it's low on iron, low on nitrogen. Another thing that happens, let's see if I can find it, sulfur. The leaves start turning yellow. My green bean plants tell me when it needs more sulfur, and I will sprinkle sulfur right onto the leaves. The leaves start turning a little bit yellow, and also if the leaves start showing that they've got fungus, a sprinkling of sulfur gets rid of that fungus right away. But you need to listen to your plants really closely. Your plants will tell you what they need, but you've got to catch it early if it's going to do them any good. These beans were perfect yesterday, but look, just overnight, they're giving me an indication that they need some sulfur. See how light some of the leaves are? You got to take care of it right away. It only takes a light sprinkle of sulfur. It will cure the need for sulfur, but it'll also get rid of rust. You'll need to reapply when you see the rust coming back again. And I know that once rust is on one kind of bean, they're most likely on all the rest of the beans in the garden. It spreads like wildfire, and sure enough, when I took a close look, the Henderson butter beans right here were affected, as well as the Ford Hook butter beans down at the end. And to my surprise, I saw some rust damage right here with my bush Blue Lake beans as well. So you've got to catch it right away. All of these beans were perfect just 24 hours ago. Do your soil test. If you don't live in Florida, find a university or maybe an agricultural center that will help you with that. If not, go buy an over-the-counter test. It's better than nothing. It's going to help you. You've got to know what your soil needs. A lot of what I've learned is just through trial and error, a lot of observation. About 35 years ago, I had an old friend who had raised her family through the Depression. Her husband was a farmer, but she had the family garden. And it was real important that she was successful because that's how they fed their family. So she had many years of experience. She learned what worked and learned what didn't work. Somewhere along the line, she got a son-in-law who went to college, went to agricultural school, and they lived next door to each other. And he started telling her how she could improve her gardening skills. Well, she didn't listen to him, but he did what he had learned in the classroom. I'll never forget her chuckling when she said, "He's telling me how to grow my garden, but my garden is doing better than his."
Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me.